Hello, all you freedom-loving people. The U.S. military seized 2 oil tankers today, one flying a Russian flag. The White House has redefined the actions on January 6, 2021 as a peaceful protest, and the House Oversight Committee held a hearing on the Minnesota fraud today. Okay, let's get into it. Today, an Immigration and Custom Enforcement agent shot and killed an anti-ICE protester during an operation in Minnesota. Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin said that a woman was shot in her vehicle in a residential neighborhood in Minneapolis. An undisclosed number of immigration officers were hurt in the process, but are expected to make full recoveries. During a news conference, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defended the ICE officer and said that it was self-defense. Noem said that ICE agents were attacked while getting their cars unstuck in the snow, which they called an act of domestic terrorism.
It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased. We're continuing to gather more information, but this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. These vehicle rammings are domestic acts of terrorism. We're working with the Department of Justice to prosecute them as such. We will continue to protect our ICE officers and in cooperation with other law enforcement agencies as well.
According to live video posted online, there was a large presence of federal and local officers, yellow police tape, and cars that had been in a crash, with Custom and Border Protection Commander Gregory Bovina among them. In response, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz urged folks to stay calm. In a press conference, he also asked Minnesotans to stay peaceful.
To Minnesotans, I say this: I feel your anger. I'm angry. They want a show. We can't give it to them. We cannot. If you protest and express your First Amendment rights, please do so peacefully, as you always do. We can't give them what they want. The hearts and minds of the people in this state are on our side. To Americans, I ask you this: please stand with Minneapolis. Minnesotans, don't take the bait. Do not take the bait. Do not allow them to deploy federal troops into here. Do not allow them to invoke the Insurrection Act. Do not allow them to declare martial law. Do not allow them to lie about the security and the decency of this state. And let's let this investigation play itself out. Let's make sure we protect our neighbors. I encourage you to use your First Amendment rights and all of your constitutional rights, but do so in a peaceful manner.
Walz also said that he's prepared to deploy the Minnesota National Guard.
Order to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. We have soldiers in training and prepared to be deployed if necessary. I remind you, a warning order is a heads up for folks. And these National Guard troops are our National Guard troops. They're teachers in your community. They're business owners. They're construction professionals. They are Minnesotans. Minnesota will not allow our community to be used as a prop in a national political fight. We will not take the bait.
Meanwhile, today, the House Oversight Committee held its hearing on Minnesota fraud and the misuse of federal funds. Chairman James Comer opened the hearing by giving an overview about the investigation.
Today, we're joined by witnesses from Minnesota State House of Representatives who have been fighting this fight for years. These legislators are on the front lines, uncovering fraud in Minnesota's social services programs day in and day out, and trying to get their state agencies to fix it. Thank you all for what you're doing to uncover the truth. This isn't just a Minnesota problem. It's a problem for taxpayers across the United States. About 35% of Minnesota's budget comes from federal grants. 35% of Minnesota's budget comes from federal grants. Hardworking Americans pay those taxes, and that money is being funneled to fraudsters, funding luxury homes, fancy cars, and vacations abroad. Some of it is even allegedly going overseas to support terrorists. And yet, Governor Walz, Attorney General Ellison, and Minnesota Democrats failed to act despite countless warnings. They failed Minnesotans and all Americans, handing millions of taxpayer dollars to fraudsters. They failed children and others in Minnesota. They failed their own state employees, some of whom have come forward as whistleblowers. These whistleblowers have told us that the Walz administration retaliated against employees who warned and alerted the administration to the fraud occurring within these social services programs. Again, Governor Walz accused employees who were simply doing their jobs of racism, Islamophobia, and threatened surveillance to silence them. President Trump and his administration are taking a whole-of-government approach and prosecuting these fraudsters.
Comer also revealed a new audit that exposes Minnesota's DHS backdated documents that handed over $680,000 to a grantee with no proof of work.
Yesterday, Minnesota's Office of the Legislative Auditor published an audit of the state's Department of Human Services Behavioral Health Administration grants. I'd like to enter that report and its cover letter into the record. Without objection, so ordered. The cover letter of this report states, quote, however, during the course of our audit, we identified a number of documents that the Behavioral Health Administration either backdated or created after our audit happened, end quote. It sounds like Governor Tim Walz's Department of Human Services may have been fabricating evidence by creating documentation after the fact to mislead voters, to mislead auditors. This new report noted that one grantee who received nearly $680,000 from this agency for 1 month's work, but could not provide any documentation or proof that any work was actually completed. What's more, and this is the kicker, the report notes that the grant manager who approved this money left the agency within days of approving the grant to take a job with the very same grantee that they approved money for.
During the hearing, Representative Tom Emmer questioned Representative Marion Rarick about whistleblowers who had previously come forward with information about the fraud.
Representative Rarick, I'm going to begin with you. You've been working on this issue for years. You've spoken to the whistleblowers personally. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You have an understanding that 1,000 whistleblowers running an account on X have come forward to expose fraud in Minnesota state agencies, and they have been entirely ignored by Tim Walz and have even been retaliated against. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Even this morning, I got another message.
Well, in your experience, are their claims credible or are they politically motivated against Walz?
They're completely credible, not politically motivated.
In fact, many of these are Walz administration employees, correct?
They are actually Democrats as well.
Can you quickly give us one example of the retaliation these folks have been facing?
Yes, I can. In my opening statement, I mentioned that the most severe ones was that they would be fired with cause, so they couldn't have unemployment insurance, that they would be blacklisted from all state agencies, and I bet that it's also Hennepin County and Ramsey County, as you know, those are Democrat-run, and much, much more.
Based on what you've learned, Representative, over the last several years, do you have any doubt that Governor Tim Walz knew about this fraud as it was occurring?
He absolutely knew that it was occurring.
Representative Brandon Gill asked Minnesota Representative Kristen Robbins about when she thinks Governor Walz knew about the fraud.
When would you say we concretely knew that widespread welfare fraud was occurring in Minnesota?
There have been reports since 2009 from the Office of Legislative Auditor. I would say the credible reports on child care fraud started surfacing 2011 to 2013.
So for over a decade.
Yes, sir.
When do you think Governor Walz knew about this fraud?
From the very beginning. He was running for governor in 2018 when there were prosecutions going on, when there was an OLA report, active cases in the news all the time.
And what was the Walz administration's response?
They actually did nothing when they got into office, and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan had been on the committee in the legislature that had hearings on child care fraud, and when they got into office, they did put $5 million into a little more money, but nothing changed.
For the hearing today, Comer had invited Walz and Attorney General Ellison, but they did not show up. In an interview with Fox News, Comer talked about what's next.
Are you going to ask to speak with Tim Walz? Are you going to ask him to testify?
Absolutely. 100%. He's going to receive a subpoena if he doesn't come in voluntarily. Before I can issue a subpoena, I have to give someone an opportunity to come in voluntarily. We've done that. We haven't heard back from him. He knows what the rules are in Congress. He served in Congress. So we fully expect Tim Walz to be here. And if he's done nothing wrong, then he's going to have an opportunity for due process in a few weeks in front of the Oversight Committee. He can explain to the American people how their tax dollars were wasted to one particular immigrant population in America.
Following the money isn't just a Minnesota story anymore. Investigators in California are now asking the same questions about where taxpayer funds are actually going. Yesterday, First Assistant U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley, who investigates corruption in California's homeless services, promised that more arrests are coming this year and perhaps this month. Asaley said, "We followed the money, and very quickly we uncovered massive amounts of fraud." The housing executives, Cody Holmes and Stephen Taylor, were indicted recently, and as Asaley said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Holmes is a former executive at Shangri-La Industries. He allegedly embezzled about $2 million from HomeKey. HomeKey is a homeless housing program that was created during the pandemic, and Holmes used that money for luxury purchases for himself and his girlfriend. And Taylor is a Brentwood real estate developer. He's accused of cheating lenders in a scheme to resell a Cheviot Hills property to the Weigart Center Association. This association is a state-funded homeless nonprofit. Later, Kevin Murray, the CEO of that association, resigned from a state housing oversight board because of questions about what he knew regarding the suspect housing deal. Yesterday, we mentioned a 2024 state auditor report. The report found that California had spent $24 billion to tackle homelessness over the past 5 years, but they didn't consistently track whether those taxpayer dollars actually improved the situation. According to the report, even though billions were spent on more than 30 homeless and housing programs during the 2018 to 2023 fiscal years, California doesn't have the reliable data that is needed to fully understand why the problem didn't improve in many cities. The U.S. military announced today that it seized 2 oil tankers in the Atlantic Ocean, including one linked to Venezuelan oil shipments. And on one of the oil tankers, the MV Bella 1 hangs a Russian flag. It had already been subject to U.S. sanctions since 2024. Last month, the U.S. Coast Guard attempted to intercept it near Venezuelan waters, but the ship promptly turned and fled. During the subsequent pursuit, the ship urgently transferred its flag to a Russian flag in an attempt to seek refuge. CNN reported that the vessel was subsequently formally registered under its new name, the Marinara, in Russia's official ship registry. Even though Russia sent a formal diplomatic request and ordered the United States to cease pursuit, the Trump administration refused to recognize the change of identity, and they continue to regard the vessel as the sanctioned stateless ship. The Wall Street Journal cited experts as noting that Russia's exceptionally rare decision to permit the vessel's registration without inspection or standard formalities reflects Moscow's acute concern over the U.S.'s frequent seizure of assets belonging to Russia's shadow fleet. These are vessels that serve as a vital lifeline for Russia to circumvent sanctions and to sustain its war economy. A second tanker was seized in the Caribbean Sea. It is described as a stateless sanctioned dark fleet motor tanker. The military said the interdicted vessel, MT Sophia, was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities in the Caribbean Sea. Today, Russia's state-run media, RT, published images of U.S. forces boarding the Bella 1 vessel, showing a helicopter flying near the ship. Russia's foreign ministry said in a statement that for reasons unknown to us, the Russian vessel is getting excessive attention from the U.S. and NATO militaries, clearly disproportionate to its peaceful status. War Secretary Pete Hegseth wrote on X, The blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world. Speaking at the House GOP retreat at the Kennedy Center yesterday, President Trump praised the operation to apprehend Venezuelan dictator Maduro. He praised the U.S. military operation as clean and decisive, eliminating a large number of Castro's Cuban bodyguards while sustaining no casualties. He said, "It was so complex. 152 airplanes. We had a lot of boots on the ground, but it was amazing. And think of it, nobody was killed. And on the other side, a lot of people were killed. Unfortunately, I say that. Soldiers, Cubans, mostly Cubans, but many, many killed." President Trump has once again demonstrated that America possesses the most powerful, lethal, and formidable military on earth, and that America's superiority is overwhelmingly evident. The successful capture of Maduro has been described within aviation circles as a masterful operation. Sky N, a pilot with over 2 decades of experience, said this wasn't down to sheer nerve, nor did it rely on 1 or 2 ace fighter jets. It was an entire system engineering operation where virtually no single link could afford to falter. The helicopter transporting the arresting force flew at night at an altitude of merely 100 feet above the water toward the Venezuelan coast before crossing at low altitude into Caracas. 100 feet is approximately 30 meters, equivalent to a 10-story building with each floor measuring 3 meters in height, or slightly longer than the length of a standard basketball court, which is 28 meters. 100 feet is practically no altitude at all for a pilot, Sky explained. In standard civil or general aviation training, flight altitudes are maintained at several thousand feet or higher. This ensures that should an engine fail, there is sufficient altitude for gliding, for assessing the situation and carrying out an emergency landing. But at 100 feet, there's no second chance. If there's an engine failure, a pilot error, or any sudden turbulence, there would be no time to react and no altitude to glide. Whatever is on the ground will be hit and have fatal consequences. Even over water, low-altitude night flying remains extremely hazardous, though compared to land, it affords a slight possibility of emergency landing and rescue operations. Sky said, under civil aviation standards, this type of flying is already considered an extreme maneuver, and for the U.S. military to perform it in hostile airspace makes it even more dangerous. In this operation, the U.S. military deployed over 150 aircraft encompassing F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, EA-18 electronic warfare aircraft, E-2 early warning aircraft, B-1 bombers, helicopters, and a significant number of unmanned aerial vehicles. These took off from 20 different bases across the Western Hemisphere. Sky stated the operational complexity far exceeded expectations. Different branches of the military with their own diverse aircraft types and separate chains of command were operating simultaneously at night within hostile airspace. Even minor communication errors could have resulted in incidences of friendly fire, aircraft becoming lost, or positions being compromised. It is precisely for this reason that in the eyes of professional aviators, this operation was not merely bold, but rather a systemic miracle, achievable only by the United States. Such a miracle is indeed worthy of presidential boasting. Yesterday evening, President Trump stated that Venezuela's interim government would transfer between 30 million and 50 million barrels of sanctioned oil to the United States. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump explained that the deal is beneficial to people of both countries. He wrote, "I am pleased to announce that the interim authorities in Venezuela will be turning over between 30 and 50 million barrels of high-quality sanctioned oil to the United States of America. This oil will be sold at its market price and that money will be controlled by me as President of the United States of America to ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. The White House has redefined the January 6, 2021 incident at the United States Capitol as a peaceful protest. To mark the 5-year anniversary of January 6, 2021, the White House unveiled a new website that hails the patriots who marched to Congress in protest and later entered the U.S. Capitol. The website says that Democrats staged the real insurrection by certifying a fraud-ridden election. The White House described the demonstrators' walk down Constitution Ave as orderly and spirited, with flags, signs, and chants, before noting that then Vice President Mike Pence declined to return slates of disputed electoral counts from states to their legislatures. As for these peaceful protesters eventually entering the Capitol, this was the result of the officers deliberately escalating tensions when they chose to fire tear gas, flashbangs, and rubber munitions into crowds. Prior to this, there had also been some misleading actions on the part of the Capitol Police. The website also faults the Capitol Police for inexplicably removing barricades, opening Capitol doors, and even waving attendees inside the building. These were actions that facilitated entry, while at the same time, they simultaneously deployed violent forces against others. The website also says these inconsistent and provocative tactics turned a peaceful demonstration into chaos. The site also listed Ashley Babbitt, the Air Force veteran who was shot to death by a USCP officer on that day, and 3 other attendees who died later by suicide. And Officer Brian Sicknick died from a stroke, but his name is not listed. But White House Communications Director Stephen Chung suggested in an ex-post that the web page might be a trap to spark outrage from the media, and it certainly worked. The mainstream media unanimously slammed the new website. Outside of Capitol Hill, a much smaller but ardent crowd of President Trump supporters returned to the site of the 2021 incident, marking the first January 6th since President Trump fully pardoned them for their actions on that day. The White House stated that many of the nearly 1,600 patriotic Americans prosecuted for their presence at the Capitol were mere trespassers or peaceful protesters treated as insurrectionists. The website also stated President Trump took decisive action to pardon the January 6 defendants who were unfairly targeted, overcharged, and used as political examples. The United States will hold midterm elections in November. Speaking at a House GOP retreat at the Kennedy Center yesterday, President Trump urged Republican lawmakers to secure victory in the midterms. Should the Republicans not win the majority in the House, the Democrats would seize upon any excuse to impeach President Trump. He said, "You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached." President Trump was impeached for the second time by Democrats over the speech that he delivered on January 6. President Trump said, "I got impeached twice on nothing." House Speaker Mike Johnson issued a similar warning in December at the Turning Point USA America Fest. He said, "If we lose the House majority, the radical left, as you've already heard, is going to impeach President Trump. They're going to create absolute chaos. We cannot let that happen." Last year, Democratic lawmakers attempted on several occasions to propose impeaching President Trump, but the motions were shelved in the House of Representatives. Following the Trump administration's military action to capture Maduro, several Democratic lawmakers raised the possibility of impeachment. In order to impeach a president, the House only needs a simple majority. The GOP only holds a slim majority in the House, which is now a 2-vote margin after the unexpected death of California Republican Representative Doug LaMoffla and Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's early retirement on Monday. Although President Trump reviewed the achievements of the past year in his address, he also voiced concern over the historical pattern that the incumbent party typically performs poorly in the midterms. President Trump said, "I wish you could explain to me what the is going on with the mind of the public." President Trump also urged Republicans to work together in a more unified fashion on issues such as transgender-related issues, healthcare, and election reforms, as well as policies in order to reduce the cost of living. With healthcare expected to be a major focus of this year's elections, President Trump repeatedly suggests paying Americans directly so they can buy their own health care and health insurance. He told lawmakers, "Let the money go in a health care account, or however you do it, let the money go directly to the people." President Trump criticized the current state of American health care. He described it as prohibitively expensive and chaotic. He attributed this to healthcare corporations being major financial backers of the Democratic Party. Democratic policies are therefore perceived as safeguarding the interests of these companies. He also advised Republicans to adopt a flexible approach on the issue of abortion. He said, "Now, you have to be a little flexible on Hyde. You know that. You got to be a little flexible. You got to work something. You've got to use ingenuity. You've got to work. We are all big fans of everything, but you've got to be flexible." The Hyde Amendment is a decades-old provision that bars federal funding from going to abortion services. President Trump said that the mainstream media is controlled by the left. Good deeds done by the Republican Party go unreported. Meanwhile, the Democrats always present a unified front, whereas Republicans are perpetually divided. Nevertheless, President Trump believes that elections can be won as long as people receive tangible benefits. The White House stated yesterday that President Trump and his team are discussing plans to acquire Greenland, and using the U.S. military is not off the table. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said, President Trump has made it well known that acquiring Greenland is a national security priority of the United States, and it's vital to deter our adversaries in the Arctic region. The president and his team are discussing a range of options to pursue this important foreign policy goal, and of course, utilizing the U.S. military is always an option at the commander-in-chief's disposal. Multiple media outlets have reported that according to a senior U.S. official, the government is considering several options, including purchasing the territory from Denmark or establishing a free association agreement with the island. The leaders of the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, and Spain expressed support for Denmark. The leaders said in a joint statement, Greenland belongs to its people, and only Denmark and Greenland can decide on matters concerning their relations. A senior U.S. official stated that President Trump aims to complete the acquisition during his current term. Despite opposition from NATO leaders, the issue will not simply disappear. The Wall Street Journal reported that Marco Rubio played down the possibility of military action during a congressional briefing, and he emphasized that the goal is to buy the island from Denmark. On Monday, Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen stated that the governments of Denmark and Greenland had requested a meeting with Rubio. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.